This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 109 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you've joined us. Glad you're listening in to the podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome. Glad you found us. Glad you're listening to the podcast. If you're coming back for more, glad you're back. And I hope you've subscribed to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. So as I'm recording this, it is pretty close to the holiday season. Recording this, midway through December, and this is going to be my last episode for 2019. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. I'm going to take a little bit of time off between Christmas and New Year's, and I just figured people are going to be pretty busy this time of year with either Hanukkah plans or Christmas plans or whatever plans. If you celebrate the holidays, you're going to be busy with those things. So I thought I'd just take time off, and hope you'll go back and listen to some older episodes if you haven't done so already. But anyway, just wanted to give people a heads up about that. I'm really looking forward to the new year, and I was working today on my calendar and already getting a staff meeting planned for my staff here at my counseling practice, Kingsport Counseling Associates, and really looking forward to that. Going to do a day-long staff retreat. We'll get to what we do is get together. We'll find a place, some cozy place, either at a restaurant or some sort of retreat place. I'm still figuring that detail out, but we'll go and just spend the day together with each other. We've got a new intake coordinator starting with us in another week, and so I'm looking forward to her getting started. So just really excited about the new year and a lot of things coming up. You know, one of the things too is that I've been thinking about with the podcast is that I'm always looking for podcast guests. And so if you think you might want to be on the podcast, or there's a particular topic you would like to cover, me to cover on the podcast, and maybe have a guest suggestion, shoot me an email. You can get to me at gordon@practiceoftherapy.com, and love to hear from you, and we'll work that out. So getting my calendar for podcasting and all of that sort of thing ready for 2020. But anyway, just wanted to let you know about that. This past week, I did a webinar with my friend Julie Harris over at Green Oak Accounting, and we were talking about, in that webinar, preparing for tax season. And if you'll go to the website, you can still get access to that. I moved the webinar over to the Teachable platform, and it'll be up there for you to view, and it'll be free for you to view. It's just going to be a free course offering on my Teachable platform, along with I've got my other paid courses, G Suite for therapists, and also Money Matters for private practice, and already planning some new courses in the coming year, just doing some collaborating with more people. My friend David Hall and I have already talked about some topics we want to cover, and so looking forward to all that new stuff in the new year. But if you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com, you'll see a little banner at the top of the page there, should come up for you, and you'll be able to get access to that webinar that Julie and I did on preparing for tax season, because it's going to be here before you know it. And it's a free webinar, so I invite you to go over there and take a look at it. So I'm real excited for you to hear from my guest today. Janeen Herskovitz is someone I met out in Colorado back in October for Killing It Camp that you've heard me talk about here on the podcast. And I know Joe, my friend Joe Sanok, has already got, if I remember correctly, he's already got tickets for 2020 available. And I think that's going to be like the first week of October. So just a quick plug for that. But you can go to killingitcamp.com and find information for that. I love just collaborating with people, and I think this next year's conference is going to be really, really a good one. And it's a great location where they have it over in Estes Park, Colorado. And so I'll just say a quick plug for that as well. So also just be sure to go check out my resources page over at practiceoftherapy.com. I'm always adding to that, and I've got some new stuff. This year, one of the things that it came out with was the Session Note Helper, and it is just a system that you use in conjunction with Google G Suite, and it uses Google Forms and Google Docs. And essentially what it does is you just check off boxes to write a session note, and it, through the magic of an app script, that when you get the template, you get the app script preloaded, but you just check off boxes and it produces a narrative note for you. And the reason I put that together was just to save me time in my session note writing and my progress note writing and that sort of thing. But go check it out. It might be a helpful tool for you. It's not necessarily for everyone. You need to be comfortable with using Google G Suite and that sort of thing. But the other thing about it is that you can use it in conjunction with your electronic health record system. So I use it in conjunction with TherapyNotes, which is the electronic health record system I use. But you can check it out. And if you'll just go over to practiceoftherapy.com/session note helper, you can find that, or you can just go simply to sessionnotehelper.com and find out about that tool that I put together. I'm pretty excited about it. I hired an app developer to help me work on that. And so it's, I think we've got all the kinks out of it now. So, but anyway, I wanted to let you know about that. So enough about all that. So without further ado, here is my friend Janeen Herskovitz, and she's going to be talking about her niche and how she developed her niche as, in working with families who are dealing with children that are on the autism spectrum. So without further ado, here is Janeen Herskovitz. You know, whether you're starting out in private practice or been in it a while, one of the most useful tools for any practice, and it really can turn out to be the hub of your practice, is your electronic health record system. TherapyNotes is the leader in electronic health record system. They have a wonderful platform, and it's what I use in my practice. So go check them out today, therapynotes.com, and if you'll use the coupon code Gordon, just Gordon, you can get your first 2 months of their services for free. But check them out. It's a wonderful tool for your practice. therapynotes.com. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so happy to have with me today Janeen Herskovitz. And Janeen and I met, she's another one of those great people that I met back in October at Killing It Camp that Joe Sanok sponsored. And so Janeen is just a delight, and I'm so happy to have had some conversations with her along the way. Janeen, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Gordon. It's great to be here.
Yes, and I'm real excited about this topic because the things that we're going to be talking about today, because I think it on two fronts. One, on the clinical front, just in working with autism spectrum families, and then also just I think people are going to be curious about how you have developed that niche and your use of your own podcast. And tell folks the name of your podcast.
Yeah, it's called Autism Blueprint, and it basically focuses on autism in the home. And so each episode, we kind of take a different room in the house and focus on a topic that would apply to home and family.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to have that in the show notes, links to that. But Janeen, as I start out with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've kind of ended up where you've ended up so far?
Sure. Well, I'm a licensed mental health counselor in North Florida. And I always tell people that the niche chose me. I didn't, it was something I didn't necessarily sign up for. I have a son who's now 22 years old, and he's severely affected by autism. He needs 24/7 care. And so during that journey, it was before I became a therapist that he was diagnosed at age 3. And I just didn't have any support at that time. I didn't, the incidence of autism at that time was growing, but it wasn't what it is now. And the awareness wasn't what it is today. So there was plenty of therapies and support for my son, but not very much for me. And so I felt like once I got through kind of my darkest times, because I'm very open about my journey, because I think it's important to let people know that the grief and the depression that I experienced was profound, and I really needed support. And I got it eventually, but if I had known in the very beginning that I would need it, I think I probably wouldn't have hit bottom as hard as I did.
Right. And I think that's a story, I've shared with folks that my wife is disabled. And I think the parallel I think about is that most people don't realize, I think a lot of times, the effect it does have on family members, and just trying to, because you're always on.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's just, it can take its toll. And so, I'm so grateful to you for sharing that. I mean, that's a pretty incredible story. So as you saw the need, and it sounds like a lot of us, we go into this field really out of a sense of really trying to help ourselves, and just developing a passion for it. So tell us a little bit about your private practice and when you went into that.
Sure. Well, I went immediately into private practice. Actually, once I graduated and started my my internship, I had the opportunity to work in an office with an autism doctor, an autism specialist. She's a functional medicine doctor, and she also happens to be my son's doctor. So she had said to me, "Hey, I have some office space and another clinician that can supervise you if you'd like to work out of here." So that's where I started. And then it just organically grew. And now I'm in the space that's right next to her office. And the two of us can kind of co-treat families, which is really nice.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a different journey than most. I never did any agency work or anything like that. I just jumped right into private practice, and, was blessed enough to have a lot of the people in my life already because of my own autism journey.
Right.
So I have one clinician who's a marriage and family therapist that works with me. And then I also have an educational specialist that goes into homes and helps with tutoring and things like that.
Wow. That's quite a model. I think I love that kind of systemic way of thinking about things, because I know one of the things that I did before I went into private practice is I worked for a nonprofit organization, and we worked with at-risk children and youth. And so had a little bit of experience in working with, children that were on the autism spectrum and that sort of thing back in the day. And, one of the things that I guess I learned from that whole experience is the importance of taking that systemic approach with those issues, because it affects everybody in touch with that particular person that's dealing with that. So
it does. And it also tends to affect every aspect of that person's life. Their what they eat, how they sleep, sometimes their immune systems are affected, their anxiety levels, their ability to be educated, to communicate. I mean, even the kiddos that we see that are what people say are higher functioning, and I say that in quotes because sometimes they're not functioning highly at all. It's just that they can verbally communicate better than someone that can't. but it's a real challenge, especially for the parents. And so I work mainly with the parents, and then my other clinician, Catherine, works mainly with the kids.
Yes, yes. So, yeah. So, in thinking about, just those of us that are maybe starting to see families or clients that are dealing with, loved ones that are on the autism spectrum, what are some of those tips and hacks and that sort of thing you'd like to share, and just working with that whole population?
Yeah, sure. So I think that one of the most important parts that other clinicians need to know, because I get contacted by clinicians all the time for help in this area, whether it's just for a tip or for coaching. I've worked with some clinicians one-on-one, and done some, collaboration as far as treatment, things like that. The biggest thing that I want them to know is that you can do this. You don't necessarily have to have a lot of experience in autism to do this. You just have to have the things that you already have: a lot of empathy, a good listening ear, and to understand that this parent's journey is unique to them. And there are lots of things that you might hear that you might not be able to relate to, but I think as therapists, we're pretty good at just having that unconditional positive regard. So you've already got the skills that you need in order to do this. Some of the clinical things are, I always screen for post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's because the research shows, and then my experience as well shows, and I've been doing this for 10 years, that PTSD is very prevalent among specifically autism spectrum parents. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, the diagnosis itself has been identified as a traumatic event. And also people come into it with their own, childhood trauma or whatever that might be. My husband has given me permission to share a little bit about his story. He had some childhood trauma and then went into autism parenting and never really got help for it. And that parenting journey, which has been really difficult, really challenging with my son, ended up being his reason for having PTSD. So when he was affected with that several years ago, he went to an EMDR therapist, and that therapist just did wonders with him. And when he came home from a couple of sessions of EMDR, I said, oh my gosh, what improvement. Whatever they did to you, I need to learn how to do it. So I went and got trained in EMDR, and now I use that a lot in my office with my autism parents and with people on the spectrum as well.
Wow. Yeah, that was something I was curious about is, how effective is EMDR with folks that are dealing with spectrum issues?
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. And a lot of the time we focus more on the other things. So I often say it's kind of like all of the person's stuff has been there, and then the autism kind of pushes it all to the surface. So a lot of times we're not even talking about their child or talking about the autism, but the autism was kind of that straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
And then other times I have parents, my husband and myself included, who have had kids that have either gotten out of the yard and gone missing. My son's gone missing 3 times in his life, and it's not due to, and I want, clinicians to know this too, please don't call Child Protective Services on these parents, because it's not usually due to neglect. I mean, I guess in some cases it could be, so you want to screen for that. But these kiddos are really, really smart.
Yeah.
Even though they can't always show you that they are, most of them are highly intelligent. And so they figure out how to get out and how to, get what they need. And it's hard because sometimes they can't keep themselves safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the intelligence level doesn't always match the common sense level.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm just, as my thoughts are just spinning here, just thinking about what it's like in that world. And, I guess my initial, reaction is that for somebody to try to do all of this alone, especially a family or a parent to try to do it without supports, would be, nigh on to impossible, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. And that's another thing that I encourage parents is, I know self-care is a really big buzzword, but it's so necessary. And for autism parents, it's not, necessarily spa days and days off or nights away, but it's things like making sure that you have healthy boundaries in place for yourself, living with intention. Those are two of the things. Mindfulness is another one that I teach my clients, because you kind of have to lean into this life and create a new normal. So I help parents grieve, because they have to grieve, and the grief tends to be cyclical. It tends to come in cycles, because there really isn't a closure. You can definitely get to a better place and a more accepting place of your child. But it's difficult nowadays, because there are a lot of autistic adults that are speaking up and saying, this isn't a disorder. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't want anybody to be sad for me. And while I totally appreciate that and respect that, parents need to have permission and a space to grieve. And so that's why with my podcast, I have a private Facebook group that's just for parents and clinicians, where they can just be super raw and honest about, hey, here's what happened today with me and my kid. Here's what I'm worried about. How have you handled it? And
right.
It's a safe place for that.
Yeah. That is awesome. I'm gonna be sure and make note of that Facebook group, because I'm thinking of a few clients that I have that could really probably benefit from that, of just those resources. And so one of the, I guess the thing about support is it's very localized to some degree, but what sort of suggestions do you give parents and family when they're looking for support, how to seek that out?
Yeah, great question. So I always tell them to look first at, usually every child is in school of some sort. So to look to your child's school or educational program to find out, does that school provide any support for parents? So in our area of North Florida, we've started doing outreaches and doing parent support groups in some of the schools to help parents kind of come together. Not every school district does that or has that, but sometimes they can point you in the right direction. Usually therapists that work with autism, whether it's an occupational therapist, speech therapist, or, sometimes even mental health clinicians, they can sometimes point you in the right direction as far as where are the support groups in the area. I've started some online, what I call mastermind groups for autism parents. It's not therapy, because it can't be, because I'm in Florida, and I'm not going to treat somebody out of state. But I've had these online groups that have been really beneficial for a lot of parents, because sometimes you can't get out of the house, sometimes you can't get sitters. And so just even having, being part of an online group, whether it's a Facebook group or, something like that, can really be effective. That idea that I'm not alone and I'm not the only one going through this is probably the most therapeutic thing for parents.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's true with a lot of groups. I know I've facilitated several grief support groups in the past. And I think that is one of the things that is just so healing for people, is to be able to just tell their story in a safe place, and it not be judged, and it not be, and to feel like, okay, here's somebody that gets it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's been really the magic, so to speak, in my office, is that I do have the experience of having, this same experience as my clients. And while it's not necessary to work with them, it sure helps for me to go, I totally get it. My kid's gotten out of the yard and gone missing too. And this really sucks.
Right.
Just to let them know that even me, it's even happened to me.
Yeah.
So it's not them, because parents tend to blame themselves. There's a lot of self-blame and self-criticism, and this feeling of I'm not doing enough for my child is the
Right.
general feeling I get from the moms, especially.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but I'm not sure if you know Jeff Gunther, who does. He has the Therapy Den. It's a directory, but he also has a podcast called Say More About That. And what he does is he actually interviews clients to find out about their therapeutic experiences and just to help other clinicians know how to do therapy better. But one of the things that he said is really helpful to clients is for therapists to do a degree of self-disclosure, in terms of sharing their own life's experiences and that sort of thing. And I would think for you, Janeen, in what you're doing in your niche, that is absolutely essential, I would think. And that
It
it
really
gives
is.
you and that it gives you a level of for lack of a better term, clout with people. Even though you've got the letters after your name and the degrees and all of that, your life experience just adds even more to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been my experience. And, I've had parents tell me a lot of times that just knowing that and they know most of the time a therapist isn't going to judge them, but there are a lot of things in the autism world as a parent that are very, I guess, embarrassing, and that you just don't want to tell people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my kid one time got lost in Target, and when we found him, he was completely naked. And that's something that you just, like, we're walking out of the store, don't make eye contact, and we can laugh about it now because but at the time it's traumatic,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we're like, oh my gosh, let's never speak of this again, because this is so, it makes you feel like, well, I'm doing something wrong as a parent. Like, this child is how is this happening?
Yeah.
So there are definitely, that self-disclosure is important. And I think just clinicians in general need to remember that as long as that self-disclosure is for the purpose of helping that client, then I think it's okay.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So to switch gears just a little bit, you've got your podcast, and tell folks a little bit how obviously it's a topic that you're passionate about, which I think is always essential. But how has that helped your practice, just from the business side and just the practice building side?
Sure. Well, it's definitely my passion. I mean, I can talk to people about this for hours. It's just something I feel so passionate about, because what I learned along the way is that in having a kiddo that's an escape artist and that needs 24/7 attention, there are things about our home that you don't find in a normal home. So, there's locks on the doors with keys, and there's, our glass sliding doors are now plexiglass, because sometimes if he has a gigantic meltdown, sometimes windows and glass get broken. And it's really difficult sometimes for people on the spectrum to regulate their emotions, and meltdowns can be catastrophic when you're 22 years old and almost 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
So we've designed our home for him, and so that's kind of, I talk about that a lot in the podcast, and then I also interview people that have experience in the field, so that parents can learn more about resources and things. But as far as my practice goes, I kept it separate from the practice for a while, and then when I had Brighter Vision take over my website, I asked them if they could combine the two into one website. So my practice website, because the subject matter is the same, it made sense for me. And I wasn't blogging because I didn't have the time. So once they combined the two, and did a beautiful job, by the way, highly recommend, then my SEO went through the roof.
Wow.
It just went through the roof, because I'm putting out these podcasts regularly, and they're optimizing them for SEO. And so that was one less thing I had to worry about. So that's really helped people be able to find me. It's given me a resource to send parents to. I'm private pay only. So sometimes parents will call and say, we really need to use our insurance. And I have people I recommend, but then I'll say, hey, here's my podcast information. It's free. And then that gives me another way to help people.
Right. Well, I think too the one thing about podcasting that I've learned is that it's easy for people to make a kind of a personal connection that they really are able to just get a feel for the person through a podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Because I've done some coaching, online coaching for parents, and I've gotten those clients through the podcast. Because if they're listeners, they know, they trust me, and hopefully they like me, and they feel like they could benefit from, that one-on-one.
Right.
So that's been great. I've really enjoyed that.
That's great. Well, Janeen, I think we could probably spend, a whole day talking about all of this, and I wish we could, but I want to be respectful of your time and for joining me today on the podcast. Tell folks about how they can get in touch with you and your website and all of that.
Sure. Well, my website is puzzlepiececounseling.com, and it's PEACE, peace. But honestly, I bought both domain names with peace spelled both ways, just in case.
Oh, okay, good.
So if you type in puzzlepiececounseling.com, or if you type in autismblueprint.com, that'll go directly to my podcast page. And, I welcome emails and questions. I'm always open to answering them. And I also have a handout, 5 best practices for therapists working with autism spectrum parents, which I'll give you that link to.
Okay. Awesome. And we'll definitely get that in with the show summary and show notes so that people can have link to those things. Well, Janeen, it was great to reconnect, and I know I'm going to probably need to get you back on the podcast again
to
talk about this, because I think it's such a needed thing. And, I like to mix in just some clinical things in with the business things. And because I know it's stuff that people are hungry for and that we all want. So thanks so much. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah. And the best of holidays to you as this is, as I mentioned to you, this is going to be the last episode for 2019. And so, wishing you a very happy new year. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed hearing from Janeen. As you probably can tell, she's just a delightful person and just so passionate about the work that she does and working with families that have children on the autism spectrum, and she knows it firsthand. And that was one of the things that was just really touching for me, and that you can hear the passion and she lives it. So just in dealing with her own son and being able to help him thrive in this world, which is so difficult for so many people that struggle with that whole autism spectrum disorder that we run into. And anyway, I'm grateful to Janeen for the work she does. And so hopefully this has been a learning experience for you. And just do reach out to her. She's got some great resources, and take a listen to her podcast as well. And like we said, all that's in the show summary and the show notes for this particular episode. Do be sure to also maybe get ready for tax season and check out the free webinar we've got still available. And you'll see links on the page there. If you'll go to practiceoftherapy.com/tax webinar, that'll get you to the right place, hopefully, to see the replay of the webinar that Julie and I did. And so give you some information about just getting ready for tax season so it's not so intimidating for you. And also be sure to check out the other resources I have at the Cool Resources page. And you can go to practiceoftherapy.com and be sure to look for the button there that just says Cool Resources. The other thing I'd love for you to do is check out the session note helper that I developed this year and see if that's a tool that might be useful to you. And you can get to that at sessionnotehelper.com. Also, big thanks to our sponsors for today's podcast episode, Green Oak Accounting. Again, my friend Julie Harris and her team will do a free consult with you just to talk about your whole financial the whole financial side of your practice and make you feel good about that. And also be sure to check out TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. They're an electronic health record system, and they're who I use in my practice. So I just can highly recommend them. They have just got a wonderful platform. And if you use the coupon code Gordon, just GORDON, when you go to therapynotes.com, you can get 2 months of their services for free to try them out. So take care, folks. I hope you have the happiest of holidays, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again in 2020 or 2020, however you want to say that, in the new year. I'm just excited to get started with a new year. I'm looking forward to the holidays as well, getting together with my family and doing a little bit of traveling, but it's always a great transition time. So take care, folks, and we'll talk to you next year. Take care. Bye-bye. You have been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.